Welcome to the Painting of the Week podcast, where we look at some of the most significant paintings throughout history. Introducing your hosts, Phil Grabsky and Laura Bentham.
Welcome to this week's Painting of the Week. And today, Laura and I are going to be talking about Christ of St. John of the Cross by Salvador Dalí. Fascinating painting, and of course, as ever, if you want to look at the painting before, during, after the podcast, please go to our website, seventh-art.com. Click on podcast and the painting will pop up. And that is, of course, also where you can see the 60 or 70 other podcasts that we've done, or indeed, if you want to watch any of the films, 200 plus films that we've made over the last few decades, then they're all there too. Many, many, many art films, including almost all of the exhibition on screen films. Right. Now, talking of the exhibition on screen, so I first came across this painting when I directed a program for exhibition on screen called Easter in Art. And the premise of that film was the greatest story ever told, the greatest story ever painted, and how those last few days of the life of Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, have also been the material for essentially a history of art. Practically every painter, certainly up until the 20th century at least, will have at some point tackled the last few days, whether it's a Last Supper or the crucifixion or the resurrection or the raising of from the dead of Jesus, or whatever it might be. Doubting Thomas, Caravaggio, and others so many, I can't even list them. Anyway, the film was based on just the texts from the four main Gospels, telling the story of those last few days, and illustrated by paintings by great and not so well-known artists from the last, 1500 years. We went right back to Roman times. And this was one of the paintings that we used in the film, which is so striking, so memorable, and in a sense, a bit. If you don't know a great deal about Dalí, or you just know about his melting clocks and his funky twirled moustache,
Ants.
It's almost a surprising painting of his, but it certainly shows his technical ability. But anyway, Laura, before I...
Well...
Tell me about...
Well, do you think most people paint these last few days of Christ because most people can understand that story? As an artist, it's like, well, if I'm going to do anything in my life, or those painters especially, they were like, oh, I'm going to make sure I do something to do with Christ, like you say, resurrection, the cross, something like that, just because people will instantly gravitate towards it and understand it. Okay,
let me answer that. I was looking for you to tell me what you thought of the painting. But,
I can come straight to that. I think of the painting.
But we'll go. But I'll answer the question. Which
it's quite interesting how many painters have actually done it, like you say.
First of all, most painters up until say the last 100 years are artisans, if you like. I mean, they have to work for money.
Yeah. Oh, right, okay.
So they're working for a commission. And it was pretty unusual. I mean, we're currently just finishing off our Van Gogh Poets and Lovers film. And, Van Gogh is one of those late 19th century artists who is painting without necessarily knowing where the painting is going to be sold to.
Yeah.
But he's certainly very keen that they get sold. I've said before that to understand the life of Mozart, you have to understand that every single thing he wrote, there was a commercial imperative behind it. He's doing it for money. He doesn't write these things for fun.
No, okay.
So artists are, in the hands of those who commission them. So occasionally you might be lucky and you might get to do a portrait of a count or a duchess. But really what you're looking to do is to get commissioned for a major palace or a major church.
Okay.
Basically, the primary commissioning body for hundreds and hundreds of years is the church.
Yeah.
And in the Catholic Church, unlike the Protestant Church, which tends to be a little less decorative, a Catholic Church is highly decorated. And you're also talking about, I was going to say an audience, but a congregation who are not necessarily literate. So you are interpreting the Bible through pictures, essentially.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, if you're an artist, then, you might do the occasional pot of flowers, for somebody, or you might do a portrait for somebody. But can you imagine if you are commissioned to do a crucifixion or some other story from the Bible? These are wonderful narrative scenes. If you're doing a crucifixion, then you've got all the drama and the tension, plus a virtually naked human being, which is a great challenge to an artist.
Yeah.
And the difficulty in painting a human body being put onto a cross, taken off a cross, was a challenge to an artist. And bear in mind that often these are large paintings. The crucifixion would often sit behind the altar deliberately, because when they were doing the bread and wine, the body and blood of Christ, you are literally seeing behind it the body of Christ.
Right, got you.
These are it's all about the drama and the signifiers of it all. So
that makes this painting even more unique then, because he wasn't commissioned on this one.
So Dalí is an artist that, as far as I know, he was one that would paint what he wanted and hope to sell it. And by the time you get to the 20th century, artists are, and part of that is creating a personality around themselves, so that
I think he created that,
which he did extremely well. and you see that in the 21st century, where we can look at some contemporary art and actually think it's not terribly good, but if the artist has a personality, that means that art gets sold. This came up the other day. We were talking about an artist that we won't mention who, but we were seeing that the art was being sold for 90 million dollars. And part of that, frankly, is because people are willing to pay for it, and part of that is because of the personality, the biography of the artist.
So this one then is inspired because he saw a sketch by...
Well, let me just say one other thing, is you also have to bear in mind that artists, and we have in production right now a film about Caravaggio. Caravaggio had a tumultuous life, but these artists, they believed in God. They didn't really question it.
Right, okay.
They might have questioned how you communicated with God. They didn't question the existence of God.
No, and Dalí did believe in God.
And Spain was, maybe still is, a very religious country, and so whatever Dalí himself might have got up to in his lifetime, I'm as you say, I'm sure he believed in God. So there's also their own personal. They're personally communicating with their God when they paint something like this.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful...
Well, this is incredibly powerful.
And at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, there's a wonderful Last Supper that Dalí painted, which is very powerful, and they have it hung in a really prominent place too. So, let's talk about this painting.
Yes. This was then inspired by a sketch that he saw.
That Dalí saw.
Yeah, by a 16th century Spanish friar and mystic called John of the Cross.
Right.
And I can't imagine, I don't know, but how do you think there's any other paintings from that perspective, looking down like that?
I don't know.
I mean, it is so unique, and you can't fail but to be drawn into that painting. You just can't.
It's remarkably powerful.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously people are assuming that it's God looking down.
Do they assume
onto
that?
His son. Well,
I don't
know.
I've read that, but I don't. I mean, I don't. First of all, I don't. That isn't. He's not looking down, or if he's looking down, it's from. I mean, it's from an angle.
Yeah.
And
have you just one question? Have you stood in front of that painting?
No.
Have you seen it?
Oh, so where? So tell us where the painting is.
Oh, at the Kelvin Grove Art Museum in Glasgow.
Now, because there's quite a story there, isn't there?
Yeah, I think so.
So I don't know how the first communication was made, but they offered Dalí. Well, Dalí wanted £12,000, and they haggled, and they got it. They got it for 8,200.
It's so good. I love that haggling.
In 1952, and
I love that. I love the haggling. That's my favourite bit.
sorry about the phone going there. They got it for 8,000.
It was very popular.
No ID. It's going to be a scam.
Oh yeah.
But Dalí was so impressed by the director, what was his name? Honeyman or something like that. That they became friends because he liked the way that he negotiated.
That's brilliant.
And so the painting is hung up in Glasgow. I actually would like to go and see it one day.
Well, so would I.
Oh, there's a day trip.
Oh God, I'd love to do that. I love Glasgow. But I think one thing is really lovely is that because it's actually really, really well loved now.
Yeah.
Initially, I think people were, oh no, not great. We shouldn't have paid that price for it and things like that. I don't even think the Glasgow School of Art were too keen.
And I think it was attacked twice.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think the repair can still be seen where it was 1962. It was hit with a rock.
It's funny. I did read somewhere that they'd been offered millions for it, but turned it down. And part of their defence was, we earn £2,000 a year from picture rights, and you think, well, it's going to take you a long time to get millions.
Yeah,
if you're
but I can imagine that. And you must feel this if you went up to Glasgow and you know that painting's there, and you may have seen it before and you've sort of gone past it. It's like you have paintings or places that you go. There must be a painting that you always visit, like visiting an old friend.
Yeah.
And I'd love to go I almost want to go and lay with my feet up against the wall and even see if it does do any kind of 3D. I know it won't, but it just feels like it's going to because of the way it is angled. It's just such a brilliant angle. And he's got no nails in his hands. His body is perfect, no crown of thorns.
So it was a bodybuilder, wasn't it? I think.
Some Hollywood stuntman, I think.
Hollywood stuntman.
There's so many different things to read, but obviously that's why. Do you know why he didn't make him look like he was suffering?
Do you think he's not something? It feels like he's suffering to me.
Yeah, I suppose.
I mean, it is an absolutely brutal way that the Romans had of killing someone. I mean, there's been so much. I remember when I made a series about the Romans, and there's lots to admire, and the all their inventions and all the rest of it, but they were brutal. They were genocidal. And they went into what we now, the Middle East, Palestine, Israel. I mean, they just would decimate. Yeah. I mean, decimate's not the right word, actually. I mean, they would just annihilate local communities, and woe be, if you got on the wrong side of them and ended up being crucified, oh, what a terrible way to go. This described the picture, though. Christ on the cross, and but beneath him. So this is a vision by this guy in the 16th century, Saint John of the Cross. So John something or other at the time, and what is he seeing? The cross is kind of hovering above the Sea of Galilee, is it?
We
fishermen.
Said that, But the perspective is the main thing of it. Is that the idea is, I'm assuming that we're looking down because the light's coming down from above. So
well, it's nighttime, isn't it? Which I know that part of the story of Saint John of the Cross is that he because he also wrote and used to write about the night and and it's interesting having again working right now on with Vincent van Gogh and his night sky is blue with stars of yellow and pink and There's nothing here. It's just black.
No. But then at the bottom with the dawn.
Yeah.
The dawn of the new day.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people could stand in front of this painting for absolutely months and we would say all sorts of different things. I just can't...
Well, talking about the geometry. You were talking about the geometry before we started, which is interesting.
Well, Dalí got into the nucleus of the atom, was his thing. He got really into it. And it was all based on the triangle and the circle. And Christ is within the triangle, which would then be the imaginary line across the hands, coming down to his feet, back up to the hands again. And then his head, the head of Christ is the nucleus of the circle. The Christian triangle is a symbol of the Trinity, and the circle is a symbol of eternity. I mean...
So, is Dalí just playing with geometry? Is he actually trying to say something?
Oh, I mean, I can't feel...
How do we know?
I did try to work it out.
Yeah.
I have only 50 coloured pens. And when I was looking at lobsters on phones and...
There's only so much you can do.
Literally, like melting clocks and then... And people with the melting clocks, there was an interview and he was saying, well, it was just melting camembert cheese that I had on a picnic. And so a lot of people didn't really like him towards the end, did they? They sort of thought he'd sold himself, sold out. It's one of those things, isn't it? You probably get so successful by being... I mean, back in his day, he would have been quite quirky. Now, with the art that we see... He probably wouldn't even have been a standout, a lobster on a phone. We would have been, oh yeah, isn't that? Not sort of that worried about it. But at the time, everyone would have been going, wow, he's so different, he's so quirky. So then you have to continue. You can't change that, can you? He has to carry on. And then, sort of, I think, did he not just... Everyone just sort of grew not to like him in the end and sort of thought he was just a bit odd. Which is a shame in a way. I don't know. He's quite a controversial figure. Because of, he was with the surrealist movement, sort of threw him out and everything, didn't they? So,
he would seem to be saying that to communicate. He's obviously positioning the crucifixion as a highly, highly important event.
Yeah,
and that still to communicate with God, you still have to acknowledge that the Son of God dies on the cross, and yet is the following day or shortly thereafter is resurrected.
Yeah.
Which is the essence of...
But he was all about the dreams and the subconscious. So in a way, he was inspired by somebody else's vision.
Yeah.
Which is quite weird and unique. Well, I mean, I read... me and my daughter were trying to work it out. Someone, you said he had keys in his hands. And I think she said it was a ball, and then it had a metal dish underneath, and he was constantly in the day sort of falling asleep, and as soon as that key dropped, he would wake up and then instantly paint
that's interesting.
Moment in time. So, because his actual painting is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, it's very sort of cinematic in its way, isn't it? It's so... I don't even know how he really, created these paintings. They're so fine.
It's very beautiful.
Yeah.
And he's obviously made a choice not to have the crown of thorns, not to have the nails through the hands.
Yeah.
It doesn't reduce the suffering that I see in the painting, but...
Yeah. But his body is in perfect condition.
It's obviously a challenge to him too. Dalí's... he's showing what he can do as a painter by showing this unusual... it's pretty unusual to see somebody from above.
Yeah. And the whole outside is black, but the clouds, everything about it is actually... It is a beautiful painting. So it would be... And I don't think I saw any others from that perspective at all, which made it so unique. But he was such a wonderfully...
it is. You got.
Crazy character.
The seascape or lakescape. That's a completely different perspective, isn't it? That's what's slightly odd about this. Slightly surreal.
Yeah.
Is that we're on the ground looking out, whereas with the crucifixion we're obviously above not directly above. I mean, that would be an interesting view, looking straight down. We're out to the front, looking down.
Yeah, it feels like you really do want to get underneath it, to me.
But that and also that cross, it's too solid. I mean, there's no way they'd have had... I mean, just getting that upright...
Yeah.
That looks just really heavy.
Yeah, yeah. But he really was... Oh, man. And the fact that he didn't do it as any kind of commission is quite an interesting point then, isn't it?
And actually £8,000 is not huge. But I guess it's this idea that Christ... well, I mean, maybe in 1950, maybe it's quite a lot of money, but still. So here we have Christ as the centre of everything, centre of the universe. And the triangle is almost like an arrow, isn't it? Pointing straight down to earth. Quite why he's done, I mean, the fishermen. Maybe it's that the disciples, after his death, it's up to the disciples to go out and fish for mankind, in the sense of, gather in mankind and spread the word.
And tell the story. Yeah. But as always, with these paintings, there's always just like a gazillion questions. And not so many answers, which is exactly what he wanted as a painter. I mean, he's just like... I mean, what did you think of him as a painter? Sort of as a character. Have you ever done a film on him?
I haven't done a film on Dalí, and yeah, I'm maybe a bit more traditional than surrealism. Excuse me. The same when I studied surrealist films. Sometimes they're just a bit bonkers, frankly.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you when my opinion changed. So I didn't know much about Dalí, apart from some of the most popular, well-known paintings.
Yeah.
And again, even those, if you look at them, they're technically very good.
They're amazing.
But I went to Figueras, and we went to his museum there. It is brilliant, and I came away from there thinking, what a creative individual.
Yeah.
And he just never stopped. And there's so much in that museum that shows he was just on fire all the time with creative ideas. And some of them you think are brilliant, some of them you think are just mad.
Yeah. Some
of them don't work. But that's great. He was one of these people, again, we've talked about this so often, he just had a passion to be as good as he could be.
Yeah.
And he kept experimenting and kept trying and kept doing different things. And even his whole personality was part of who he was as an artist. So I actually did contact the Dalí Foundation and said, I'd like to make a film for exhibition on screen. But they had just been involved in 3 films looking at different aspects. And so that was enough for them.
Okay.
And I think, honestly, it was a bit of a missed opportunity for them, because I don't think those films really... I think sometimes one film doing it really well is better than 3 films where one looked at where he lived and another one,
Well, maybe they'll come back to you now, Phil. They might hear this.
Yeah, or we could go back to them. The museum in Figueras, though, if you're ever anywhere near Barcelona or Catalonia more generally, definitely worth a visit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an old kind of theatre, and it's just full of... It's like a theme park. It's absolutely fantastic.
Oh, that'd be lovely.
And I also came away with a real sense of... Because sometimes you can lose the technical mastery of an artist behind all the drama of their personal lives. And actually, when you see their art and spend a little... Like this painting, I mean, that's technically really... a really fine painting.
It's extraordinary.
And...
did he just use really fine brushes all the time? I mean, I can't work it out at all.
I don't know. To be honest, if I'm being really honest, I'd need to see it in Glasgow, because the images online are not great.
No, they're rubbish, to be fair. Can we go to Glasgow? Because I'd love that.
I think that has to be a day out.
But one thing I will say, my mum bought me, and I meant to bring it up, it was so heavy. She bought me one Christmas, the cookbook the Dalí cookbook, and that is something else. And I believe that he actually wrote the recipes and things, or the recipes. I don't know how it all.
So
came about.
how much was actual foodstuffs, and how much was found objects?
And you couldn't possibly
lying around the garage.
You couldn't make any of the recipes. You just can't. They're just extravagant. But I will bring it up and show it to you one day because it is quite funny. But I also read another little fun fact, which, whether it's true or not, I don't know. I'm sure people will tell us, that apparently he never paid once for a meal.
Really?
Because what he used to do was write out a cheque for his bill and then turn it over and do a doodle or something crazy on the back and then pay, like, give it to the restaurant. And obviously they never cashed a cheque because then they thought it was going to be worth money eventually. One of his pieces of art on the back of a cheque.
Wouldn't that be brilliant if you could just go in?
Oh, yeah.
And just, take a photograph or...
Exactly.
Just the signature.
See what we can... Well, sorry, Phil, don't you do that when you go into restaurants? Do you not know who I am?
Never, ever had a freebie like that. That's not true. Actually, as a result of this podcast, we did get invited, didn't we?
Yes.
To the best paella in Barcelona.
Yes, and we haven't gone. And then we could go and see the Dalí exhibition at the museum. That would be amazing. I'll never forget that.
Well, also, see, he only, it's worth remembering he only died in 1989.
I know. It's mad, isn't it?
So he had a good old life. He lived to, I don't know what it is.
84, I think. Yeah, 84.
84 years old, yeah.
But I think it was quite tricky for him at the end. You got, people took advantage of him. I think they were stealing things from him and all sorts of stuff. So, he was probably quite an easy person to maybe forge his work and things, maybe. I don't know. They said it was kind of flooded with the market was flooded. People didn't like him towards the end, did they, at all? They just found him as a sort of a clown type figure.
Yeah, maybe that's his character. I I am going to Florida next year, so there is another Dalí museum in St. Petersburg in Florida.
Well, that's it then.
So I'll go and have a look at that.
Brilliant. Well, that'd be amazing.
I think he's a fairly major artist, actually. I mean, he basically traverses the 20th century, and he's probably influencing other artists all the way.
Yeah.
And then he's so eclectic in his interests, which I think influences contemporary modern artists.
But he probably doesn't come up much. Does he come up much in conversations? I don't really have ever really spoken about Dalí before.
I must say, people haven't. When I ask, or when I do Q&As and I ask people who would you like a film about, there are plenty of other artists that come up before Dalí. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Maybe slightly overshadowed by Picasso.
Yeah. Did they were friends at one stage, weren't they? And then did they fall out? So I think so.
Not sure. I know they met. I don't.
So it's just funny that I never really, and yet, funnily enough, when I went home to look at something, to do the podcast, I had a cookbook and 2 massive Dalí books. I realised that there are quite a lot of books in my house of him, which was quite funny.
Well, if nothing else, then maybe this short podcast will encourage people to have a look at the life and work of Salvador Dalí.
I will definitely look at that painting.
And then if you're in Glasgow, there's this fabulous painting to go and look at for yourself. And if you're in Figueras, Spain, Catalonia in Spain, or St. Petersburg, Florida, then there's 2 wonderful galleries. I haven't been to the one in St. Petersburg, but I assume it's wonderful.
That's going to be great. It's something to look forward to, Phil.
And meanwhile, we'll move on to the next painting of the week. I'm going back to editing Van Gogh, Poets and Lovers, which, if you haven't seen the exhibition, try and get to see it before the end of January 2025.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're listening to this after that date, or indeed you can't get to London before that date, then do check out the film, because it is the most remarkable exhibition. Up there with Vermeer, the greatest exhibition, which we did last year in terms of major exhibitions. And we'll keep an eye out for the next major Dalí exhibition, maybe.
Yeah.
So, Thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Painting of the Week podcast. For more information, please visit our website at 7th-art.com or contact us by emailing info@7th-art.com. See you next time.